Julian Mercer stood in the quiet attic of his late mother's countryside home, the scent of aged wood and dust filling the air like a memory refusing to fade. Sunlight filtered through the narrow window panes, casting long, golden shadows over boxes untouched for decades. His fingers traced the edges of a weathered container marked only with a name, A. Mercer. His father's name. The man he hadn't seen since he was 6 years old. With a hesitant breath, Julian opened the box, half expecting it to be filled with nothing more than old photographs or military records. Instead, what he found chilled him to the core. Resting atop the pile was a worn VHS tape labeled with a date, August 11, 1997, the same week his father vanished during a classified scientific expedition in the Arctic Circle. Beneath the tape lay a sealed envelope marked, "To Julian, when the time is right," and a small metal card engraved with strange symbols, nothing like any language he had seen. A third item sat buried under layers of cloth, a faded leather notebook. Its pages were dense with sketches, numbers, and thoughts that looked more like a stream of consciousness than any formal report. Among the scribbles, a single phrase kept repeating. "The time gate hums before it opens." Heart-pounding, Julian inserted the VHS into an old player he found in a crate nearby. The screen flickered with static before stabilizing into the image of a man, his father, sitting in a dimly lit room. Alan Mercer looked exhausted, older than Julian remembered, his eyes hollow yet aware. "If you're seeing this," Alan began, "it means time has folded in ways I never intended. You need to listen carefully. There's a reason the stars don't align the way they used to. There's a reason I'm not there." Julian froze. This wasn't just a farewell. It was a warning. Something had happened on that expedition. Something far beyond the scope of science as Julian knew it. And whatever it was, his father had left him the first pieces of a puzzle hidden beneath layers of time, secrecy, and something that felt eerily like fate. The old television screen flickered again before finally stabilizing, its glow casting a pale blue light across the dark attic. Julian sat motionless, transfixed by the grainy image of his father, Alan Mercer, who appeared both haunted and driven, like a man wrestling with truths too heavy to carry, yet too dangerous to bury. "I don't have much time," the recorded voice said, distorted slightly by the tape's age. "There are things you must understand, things I wasn't allowed to speak of, not even to your mother." Julian leaned closer, heart pounding. Every word felt like a crack in the wall of the past, widening to reveal something bigger than he'd ever imagined. "The expedition wasn't just about ice core samples," Alan continued. "We were sent to investigate a signal. It wasn't natural. It pulsed at intervals too precise, too intelligent. It originated from beneath the Arctic shelf, too deep for any known transmitter." The screen crackled, but the image held. Alan's eyes seemed to look directly into Julian's, reaching across decades. "We found something," he said. "Not a structure, a passage. It was older than anything we could date. We called it the Boreal Gate. But we didn't understand it. Not then." Julian's breath caught. His father's voice dropped to a whisper, almost as if afraid something, might be listening even through the tape. It reacted to sound, to thought. The gate responded. Then came silence. A flicker. The screen cut to static. Julian reached forward, tapping the player. Nothing. The tape had ended. But the silence in the room was different now. Heavier. Charged. Julian sat back, staring at the envelope in his lap. The seal was intact, the paper dry and fragile. With careful fingers, he broke the wax and unfolded the letter inside. The handwriting was unmistakably his father's, rushed but steady. "Julian, if this reaches you, it means I couldn't stop it. The gate wasn't dormant, it was waiting. What we uncovered in the ice wasn't just ancient, it was active. This isn't about time. It's about what lies beyond it. Find the coordinates hidden in the journal. Follow them. Don't trust anyone who tells you the gate is closed. Dad." The attic was suddenly too small, too still. Outside, a wind picked up through the pine trees, whistling like a low warning. Julian looked down at the notebook again, the phrase echoing in his mind. The time gate hums before it opens. And for the first time in years, he understood. His father hadn't disappeared. He had crossed into something else entirely. Julian spent the rest of the night at the old wooden desk beneath the attic window, surrounded by dust-coated relics of his childhood, model planes, old science books, and a photo of his parents smiling at a summer lake that no longer looked familiar. But now, those things were just echoes. His world had shifted. His focus was solely on the leather-bound journal. The notebook's first few pages seemed ordinary. Technical notes, research jargon, a few hand-sketched maps of Arctic terrain. But as Julian flipped deeper, the entries began to unravel into something far stranger. Diagrams of impossible shapes, sketches of towering archways embedded in ice, and strange numeric sequences that spiraled instead of following any recognizable pattern. And then, scrawled across a page in his father's hurried script, were words that made Julian's blood run cold. The gate pulses every 13 years. 1997. 2010. 2023. It was 2025. Julian read on. A passage had been underlined several times, the ink blotched as if written in haste. I've triangulated the signal to a point northeast of Ellesmere Island. Beneath the polar cap. Coordinates embedded here, masked under Fibonacci offsets. If you're reading this, Julian, find it, but never open it alone. Below the note was a list of coordinates, seemingly random at first. But Julian recognized the pattern from one of his father's old math puzzles. He decoded it slowly, using a nearby calculator and notebook. Each number connected to the next by a golden ratio, masked to appear like geographical nonsense. After 3 hours, he had it, 82.35 degrees north, 65.40 degrees west. He entered the coordinates into a satellite map app. The location landed in a remote, ice-covered area of the Canadian high Arctic, hundreds of miles from any known base, even beyond Alert, the northernmost inhabited outpost on Earth. No roads, no records, no signs of prior expeditions, at least officially. But Julian now knew better than to trust what was official. He leaned back in the creaky chair, rubbing his temples. A mystery buried for nearly 30 years had just pointed him to one of the most isolated places on Earth. His father had gone there, and never returned. And if what the tape said was true, he hadn't just vanished into the ice. He had stepped into something far stranger. Julian's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden flicker in the attic light. It dimmed, buzzed faintly, then returned to normal. The room felt colder. He glanced around. Nothing seemed out of place. But the feeling stayed. Like he was no longer alone. The VHS player clicked softly, a mechanical sound. It was off. Unplugged. And yet it clicked again. Julian froze, a chill creeping up his spine. He closed the notebook, stood slowly, and walked over to the window. The moon hung low over the trees. Snow began to fall in gentle flurries, dancing across the dark sky like whispers. He didn't believe in omens. But something about the sudden snowfall, this far south, this late in the season, felt like more than coincidence. He packed the journal, the VHS tape, and the strange metal card into a messenger bag. The letter he folded carefully and placed inside his coat pocket. There was no turning back now. Whether he was chasing a myth or a message, he had to know the truth. Julian wasn't a scientist like his father. He was a journalist, an investigator. But that same curiosity burned in him, a need to uncover hidden things, to bring light into places left in shadow. And this was the story of a lifetime. Before he left the attic, he took one last look at the family photo on the shelf. His parents stood arm in arm beside a lake, young and smiling, unaware of what was coming. Julian placed a hand on the image, not to say goodbye, but to promise he would bring the truth home. In the silence of the house, he whispered to himself, "I'm coming, Dad." The next morning, Julian boarded a flight to Montreal, and from there chartered a bush plane northward, carrying only what he could fit in one duffel. The cold would be brutal. The terrain unforgiving. But something in his father's voice, something in the numbers, had spoken directly to him. The gate was real. It had awakened. And it was calling again. Julian's fingers trembled slightly as he inserted the security key into the card reader. The green light blinked once, then twice, before the heavy door to the Johnson Space Center's restricted archive room slid open with a low mechanical hum. He hesitated on the threshold. This wasn't just another classified vault, it was the one his father had referenced cryptically in the sealed letter. The place where silence speaks loudest, as his father had written. Inside, the air was cool and dry, tinged with the scent of old electronics and dust sealed away from the world. Rows of metallic cabinets and large film reels lined the walls, many marked only with dates and numbers. A few old monitors blinked quietly in the dim light, casting shadows that shifted across the floor like ghosts. Julian had expected security cameras, alarms, maybe even guards. But the room was silent. Too silent. He approached a cabinet labeled Lunar Operations, 1970 to 1975, and carefully opened it. Inside were thick files, data tapes, and mission logs. He flipped through them until he found one labeled Mission D-13, Contingency, Tycho Region. His breath caught. He slid the file out and opened it. At first, it seemed like a typical mission plan, lunar coordinates, astronaut logs, photos of the moon's surface. But then, mixed in with the technical pages, he found something different. Sketches. Drawings that looked hand-drawn, not from engineers, but from someone trying to explain what they saw. A dark structure, crescent-shaped. A gate, or arch, resting partly embedded in lunar soil. He found a transcript. It was from an internal debrief following the Apollo 17 mission. The voices in the transcript described a secondary landing zone that was never made public. A module had been sent to investigate a geometric anomaly detected near the Tycho crater. The report was heavily redacted, but the remaining text mentioned exposure to light phenomena inconsistent with solar reflection and structural patterns not explainable through natural processes. Julian's heart pounded as he read. He had grown up hearing bedtime stories from his father, tales of exploration, of mysterious things buried beneath the stars. But this was different. This was real. He suddenly heard a soft click behind him. He turned around, heart racing, half expecting a guard or alarm. Instead, it was the janitor. Or at least, that's what Julian had assumed. Looking for someone, the older man said calmly, stepping into the room. Julian blinked. No. Just research. The man smiled faintly, walking toward him. You're Julian Crane, son of Dr. Andrew Crane. Julian's mouth went dry. How do you know that? Because I served with your father, the man said. Long before he disappeared. Julian stared. Your name's Harris. Security detail for Mission D-13. We were the ones who found the gate. Julian took a step back, confused and on edge. Why are you here? Why now? Harris looked past Julian at the file he had opened. Because the gate isn't closed, son. It's dormant. But not dead. He walked over to the computer terminal and inserted a small drive from his pocket. A series of logs began to display. Video clips, voice recordings, photos that had never been released to the public. In one video, Julian's father, younger and clean-shaven, stood on the moon's surface, pointing toward a massive structure in the distance. We thought we had time, Harris said quietly. We didn't. Your father knew it. And he left clues. For you. Julian's mind spun. Why me? Because the gate reacts to bloodlines. Your father learned that too late. You may be our only chance to shut it again, before what's behind it decides to come through. The air felt heavier. The silence deeper. And Julian realized the archives weren't just filled with forgotten data. They were filled with warnings. And now, he had just become part of the message. The engine of the bush plane groaned against the biting Arctic wind as Julian peered through the frost-covered window. Vast expanses of white sprawled below. Frozen rivers, towering cliffs of ice, and snowfields that stretched endlessly into the horizon. There was no sign of civilization. No roads. No towns. Just the raw, untouched edge of the world. Beside him sat a pilot named Eric, a seasoned man in his 60s who spoke little but knew the skies like the back of his hand. He'd flown research teams, climate scientists, and even documentary crews into the remote reaches of Canada's polar territory. But Julian's request had been different, unusual enough that Eric had paused before accepting. "You're not with the university," he had said, narrowing his eyes. Julian had simply replied, "Just following a family trail." Eric didn't ask more. Now, as they neared the coordinates, Eric glanced at his instruments and frowned. "There's something odd about this location," he muttered, tapping the GPS. "Magnetic drifts off. Compass is jumpy." Julian tried to stay calm, even as the words made his chest tighten. "How far are we?" 10 minutes out. But I can't land there. Too unstable. I'll drop you 3 clicks south. You'll have to hike in." Julian nodded. He had expected isolation. He had not expected the land itself to resist. The plane descended over a jagged ice field surrounded by a semicircle of snow-covered cliffs. From above, Julian could barely make out what looked like a fissure in the ground. An unnatural break, long and straight, as if the land had been torn by something beneath it. Eric landed as close as he could, the skis scraping along hardened snow. The wind screamed outside the cabin, and the cold was immediate when Julian opened the door. It cut through his clothes like a blade. "You sure you want to do this?" Eric asked one last time. Julian looked out across the barren expanse. "No. But I need to." He slung the bag over his shoulder, pulled his parka tight, and stepped into the white unknown. The trek was brutal. Each step sunk into thick snow, and beneath it, the uneven ice made footing uncertain. The sun barely rose this far north, casting only a pale blue light that never warmed the skin. Julian's breath turned to fog, his legs numb within an hour. But the compass, the strange one that had belonged to his father, began to pulse faintly. Not with light, but with vibration. A subtle tremor, like a heartbeat, guiding him forward even as the landscape remained indistinct. Then, just past a ridge of fractured ice, he saw it. A valley opened below, unnaturally smooth and flat, as though shaped by something not of this world. At its center stood an arch, massive, obsidian black, half buried in snow and ice. It shimmered faintly under the weak Arctic sun, emitting no heat, no sound, but radiating a presence Julian could feel in his chest. He stumbled forward, compelled. Every rational part of him screamed to stop, to turn back. But something deeper, something in his bones, told him this was the place. He reached the edge of the valley, wind howling around him. The compass in his hand pulsed harder now, synced to something only it could sense. He stepped forward. The snow crunched beneath his boots. And the world seemed to hold its breath. Julian stood frozen for a moment, the images on the screen blurring as his mind struggled to comprehend everything Harris had just revealed. The sheer scale of what was unfolding was overwhelming. A gate on the moon, not just any gate, but a mysterious threshold between worlds, and his father was caught in the middle of it all. The implications spiraled far beyond anything Julian had imagined. Harris leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. The Apollo 17 mission wasn't just about scientific discovery. It was a cover-up for something far more dangerous. The geometric anomaly was our first contact with the gate, and your father was part of a secret team sent to investigate further. That's why the mission never appeared in public records. Julian's hands clenched into fists. But why keep this secret? Why hide it from the world? Harris sighed. Because some truths are too big, too terrifying. What lies beyond that gate? It's not just alien technology. It's a doorway to realities we barely understand, places where the laws of physics don't always apply. Crossing that threshold could change everything. Your father's disappearance wasn't just an accident. He was trapped between dimensions. A cold chill crept up Julian's spine. His mind flashed back to the recurring dreams, the endless, silent void, the black arch, and a shadowy figure reaching out. Had those dreams been memories? Or warnings? Your father left more than just this, Harris continued. He knew the gate would awaken again soon. There's a rare planetary alignment, one that weakens the barriers between worlds. If the gate activates at the wrong time, things from the other side could spill into our reality. Julian stared at the screen as a series of new files loaded. Grainy footage showing ghostly figures moving near the gate, strange lights flickering across the lunar surface, and unexplained energy surges that distorted the very fabric of space. This, Harris said quietly, is why the Lunar Command was formed. A covert division within NASA tasked with monitoring the gate and containing any threats. But they never anticipated what's coming. They thought the gate could be sealed. But it can't. Not completely. Julian felt a weight settle over him. So what now? What can I do? Harris looked directly into Julian's eyes. Your father was working on a device, a compass of sorts, designed to interact with the gate. It reacts to more than just magnetic fields. It responds to the signature of the gate itself. It's your key. Without it, no one can close the threshold. Julian reached into his bag and pulled out the old, worn compass. The metal surface shimmered faintly under the fluorescent lights. It pulsed softly, as if alive. You must take this and find the gate, Harris said. Close it before the alignment reaches its peak. If you don't, whatever waits beyond could come through, and we're not ready. Julian swallowed hard. The path ahead was clearer now, but no less dangerous. He was being pulled into a cosmic struggle that defied reason, where time and space bent, and where the future of humanity might depend on his actions. He took a deep breath and nodded. I'll find it. I'll finish what my father started. As Julian turned to leave, Harris placed a hand on his shoulder. One more thing, he said quietly. There are others, forces that don't want the gate closed. Watch your back. You're not just fighting against the unknown out there, but against those who want to control it. Julian stepped out of the archive room, the weight of the secret pressing down on him like never before. The corridors of NASA suddenly felt colder, darker, as if the very walls whispered warnings. Outside, the sun was beginning to set over Houston, casting long shadows across the ground. Julian knew the journey ahead would be fraught with danger, deception, and challenges beyond anything he had ever faced. But one thing was certain, the gate was real and time was running out. The weeks that followed were a blur of research, travel, and whispered conversations. Julian found himself deep within NASA's maze of offices and laboratories, far from the public eye. Every step he took felt heavier, burdened by the knowledge he carried and the weight of the compass in his pocket, a silent reminder of the impossible task ahead. Houston was no longer just a city, it was the gateway to truths buried beneath layers of silence and secrecy. Julian's days were spent poring over archived data, encrypted files, and half-forgotten logs. His nights were haunted by memories of his father's voice, captured on scratchy audio tapes, describing the gate and the strange phenomena that surrounded it. But as Julian dug deeper, the walls began to close in. He realized that someone was watching him. It started small, a shadow flickering across a hallway, a glance from a suited figure who vanished when Julian tried to approach. His emails sometimes disappeared, and sensitive files he had accessed were flagged and restricted soon after. It was clear the Lunar Command's influence ran far beyond the Johnson Space Center's secure archives. One evening, while reviewing satellite imagery of the lunar surface, Julian's phone buzzed with an unknown message. It read simply, "Stop digging or lose everything." His hands trembled. Was this a threat? A warning? Or something darker? Determined, Julian reached out to an old friend from university, Dr. Maya Chen, an astrophysicist specializing in cosmic phenomena and dimensional theories. Maya had always been fascinated by the mysteries of space and the potential for other realities. I don't know what you've stumbled onto, Julian, Maya said after he explained the situation. But if what you're saying is true, it could change everything we know about the universe. I want to help. Together, they mapped out the rare planetary alignment predicted to occur in the coming weeks. The alignment, spanning Earth, the Moon and Mars, was set to open the gate's energy flux to its highest point, a moment when the barrier between dimensions would be thinnest. Julian showed Maya the compass, its faint glow pulsing softly in the dim light of her lab. She examined it with wonder, her eyes wide with curiosity. This device, it's unlike anything I've seen. It seems to respond to forces beyond standard magnetism, maybe to the dimensional energy your father mentioned. Their alliance gave Julian a glimmer of hope, but it also raised new questions. If the gate was truly a doorway to another reality, what kind of beings might cross over? Were they friend or foe? And how much had the Lunar Command been hiding from the public, and from their own agents? As the days slipped by, Julian's investigation led him to a hidden facility deep beneath NASA's surface, a place few knew existed. It was a secured lab where experimental devices related to the gate were kept under lock and key. Gaining access required delicate negotiation and subtle deception, but eventually, with Maya's technical expertise and Harris's insider knowledge, Julian stepped inside the cold, sterile chamber. There, amid glowing monitors and humming machines, lay a holographic map of the Moon's south pole, the exact location where the gate was believed to rest. The image flickered, revealing a swirling portal of shimmering light, suspended just above the surface. "This is it," Maya whispered, awe and fear mingling in her voice. "The threshold your father spoke about." Julian felt a shiver run down his spine. The portal pulsed rhythmically, as if breathing. Around it were strange markings, symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed out of the corner of his eye. Suddenly, the door behind them hissed shut. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. "Looks like we're not alone," Julian said, his voice tense. From the shadows emerged a man in a dark suit, the same man Julian had glimpsed before. His face was calm, but his eyes held a warning. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," the man said. "The gate is not a toy. If you interfere, you could doom us all." Julian squared his shoulders, gripping the compass tightly. "I'm not here to play games. I'm here to finish what my father started." The man's expression hardened. "Then prepare yourself. The real test begins now." As tension filled the room, Julian realized this was no longer just a quest for truth. It was a battle for control over a power that could change the fate of humanity, and the line between friend and enemy was about to blur. The man in the dark suit introduced himself as Agent Collins, a member of the covert Lunar Command security detail. His presence, both imposing and enigmatic, sent a chill down Julian's spine. Collins' gaze was sharp, eyes calculating, as if he weighed every word Julian spoke for hidden meaning. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest," Collins said quietly. "The Lunar Command exists to protect Earth from what lies beyond that gate. It's not just about secrecy, it's about survival." Julian's mind raced. Survival? What kind of danger were they really facing? He tightened his grip on the compass, feeling its subtle vibration. "You say the gate connects us to another dimension. But what's on the other side?" Julian asked, trying to mask the urgency in his voice. Collins glanced toward the holographic portal, then back at Julian. "Entities, beings from a world not bound by our physics. Some are curious, others hostile. Your father was caught in the middle of a conflict that was never meant to involve him. We've been monitoring that side for decades, trying to understand what they want." Julian absorbed the gravity of the situation. His father wasn't just missing, he was trapped in a place beyond human comprehension, possibly fighting to return or to stop something far worse from coming through. Maya, standing beside Julian, interjected, "Is there a way to communicate with your father? Or to bring him back?" Collins hesitated. "Communication is difficult. The dimensional interference distorts signals. But your father left behind clues. The compass you carry is one. It interacts with the gate's energy and could be the key to opening a controlled passage." Suddenly, the lab's alarms blared. Red lights pulsed urgently as the holographic gate flickered and shimmered violently. "What's happening?" Julian demanded. Collins frowned. The gate is destabilizing. The planetary alignment is intensifying the energy flow, weakening the dimensional barrier. If it collapses, the consequences could be catastrophic. Without hesitation, Collins gestured toward a hidden door at the far end of the lab. We need to move. The deeper lunar base holds equipment that can stabilize the gate, but it's a race against time. Julian and Maya exchanged a determined glance. There was no turning back. As they descended through a narrow elevator shaft carved into the bedrock beneath the Johnson Space Center, Julian's thoughts churned. What dangers awaited in the depths? How much had his father endured here? Emerging into the lower levels, the atmosphere shifted, the air cooler, tinged with the scent of metal and ozone. The walls were lined with monitors displaying fluctuating energy patterns and strange readings from the lunar surface. Collins led them to a control room filled with scientists working frantically, trying to manage the gate's unstable energy. Screens displayed real-time data from the moon, revealing the swirling portal growing larger, its edges shimmering with unnatural colors. This equipment, Collins explained, was designed to emit a counter-frequency, a resonance that can temporarily seal the gate. But the power demands are extreme. Julian glanced at the compass again. It pulsed faster now, as if responding to the growing chaos. We have to synchronize your compass with this device, Collins said urgently. It's the only way to focus the counter-frequency where it's needed most, at the gate itself. Maya connected the compass to the console, her fingers steady despite the tension. The room hummed with rising energy, lights flickering as the system powered up. Suddenly, a jarring tremor shook the facility. The monitors flickered erratically, and a low, eerie hum filled the air. Something's coming through, Collins warned. The holographic gate pulsed wildly, then briefly opened, revealing a shadowy, indistinct form beyond the veil. Julian's heart pounded. The beings from the other side were no longer just a threat in theory. They were crossing over. We must act now, Maya urged. With a steady hand, Julian aligned the compass's needle toward the portal. The device glowed brighter, sending waves of energy rippling through the room. As the counter-frequency device surged to maximum power, the gate began to collapse in on itself, the shimmering edges flickering and breaking apart like glass. But just as the portal started to close, a figure stepped through. Tall, humanoid, but clearly not of this world. Its eyes glowed faintly as it regarded Julian with an unreadable expression. The room fell silent, every breath held in tense anticipation. Julian realized this moment would define everything: the fate of his father, the future of Earth, and the fragile balance between dimensions. The figure standing before them was unlike anything Julian had ever seen. Tall and slender, with skin that shimmered faintly like moonlight reflected on water, it moved with an eerie grace. Its eyes, glowing a soft cerulean blue, held a wisdom that seemed to span centuries. Julian's breath caught in his throat. Was this the threat Collins had warned about, or something else entirely? The being spoke, its voice calm and melodic, yet carrying an undeniable authority. I am Callian, guardian of the threshold. You have come far, human, but you do not understand the consequences of your actions. Maya stepped forward cautiously, her scientist's curiosity overcoming her initial fear. What is this threshold? Why is your world connected to ours in this way? Callian's gaze shifted toward the flickering portal behind them. The threshold is a doorway between realities, a fragile boundary that keeps our worlds apart. Your father, Thomas Reed, crossed this line long ago. His presence here disrupted the balance. Julian swallowed hard, the weight of those words settling over him like a stone. My father is trapped? Is he alive? Callian nodded slowly. Alive, but changed. The energies here have transformed him. He walks between worlds, caught in a struggle to prevent the merging of our realities, a cataclysm we call the inversion. Maya exchanged a worried glance with Julian. What is this inversion? The inversion, Callian explained, is the collapse of the threshold, which would merge our dimension with yours. Our world is dying, and this event would allow our species to survive by blending into yours. But the cost would be catastrophic: for both realms. Julian clenched his fists. So my father was trying to stop this? Yes, Callian confirmed. He sought to seal the threshold and prevent the inversion. But his efforts were thwarted by those who sought to exploit the power of the gate for their own ends. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the lab. Alarms blared again, red lights flashing urgently. The gate's unstable energy surged wildly, threatening to tear the facility apart. Collins re-entered the room, his expression grim. They're coming. More entities are crossing over, drawn by the weakening barrier. Callian turned toward the approaching disturbance. We have little time. You must help us finish what your father began. Julian's heart pounded, but resolve hardened within him. Tell me what I need to do. Callian extended a slender hand, and the compass in Julian's pocket began to pulse faster. The compass is a key, a device created to interface with the threshold's energy. It will allow you to control the gate and stabilize the barrier. Maya studied the readings on the control panel. We need to synchronize the compass with the main control console, but it will require precise timing and focus. Julian nodded. I'm ready. As they worked together, the energy around the gate grew more volatile. The glowing symbols shifted faster, and the portal flickered dangerously. Steady now, Collins urged. If you fail, the threshold will collapse completely. Julian closed his eyes, concentrating on the compass and the energy flowing through it. He imagined his father's voice, urging him forward. A wave of light burst from the compass, sending ripples through the room. The portal began to stabilize, its edges smoothing into a calm, shimmering arch. But just as relief washed over them, a sudden surge knocked Julian off his feet. The shadowy forms outside the gate pressed closer, their whispers filling the air with chilling echoes. Callian's voice rang out, firm and commanding. Hold the line. The fate of both worlds depends on your strength. Julian rose, determination blazing in his eyes. He was no longer just a son searching for answers. He was a guardian standing between two realities, fighting to save everything he loved. The battle to control the threshold had only just begun. The tension in the lunar lab was suffocating. Julian could feel the immense pressure from the unstable gate pressing on his mind like a physical force. The shadows beyond the shimmering threshold were advancing, their forms more defined now. Dark silhouettes with glowing eyes, their movements swift and unnatural. Stay focused, Collins warned, gripping a control panel as if his life depended on it, which, indeed, it did. Julian steadied himself, the compass in his hand pulsing like a heartbeat. It was the only link to control the gate, to keep the barrier intact. Around him, the scientists and agents scrambled to maintain the counter-frequency equipment, but the surging energy made everything unstable, monitors flickering and alarms screaming. The shadowy entities began to slip through cracks in the barrier, materializing as eerie figures within the lab. Some were tall and slender, others short and hunched, but all radiated a chilling presence that sent a wave of cold through the room. We can't let them get any closer, Maya shouted over the chaos. She grabbed a device from the wall, some kind of electromagnetic pulse emitter, and activated it. A sharp pulse sent several of the creatures staggering back, their forms flickering but not vanishing. Collins raised his voice. The pulse only slows them. We need to seal the gate before they overwhelm us. Julian's eyes flicked to the compass. It was reacting, glowing brighter, the needle spinning faster, as if urging him to push harder. But controlling such power was draining, and his limbs trembled under the strain. Suddenly, one of the shadow creatures lunged at a technician, its fingers stretching unnaturally long. Julian reacted without thinking, raising the compass like a shield. A burst of radiant energy erupted, blasting the creature backward in a shower of sparks. Keep it together, Collins ordered. Julian, focus the compass on the gate's core. Julian closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The memories of his father flooded his mind, the voice in the audio logs, the cryptic notes, the warnings. This was more than just a mission. It was a legacy. He pushed his will into the compass, directing its energy toward the portal. A radiant beam shot forth, wrapping around the shimmering threshold like a cage. But the creatures fought back fiercely. One surged forward, and Julian barely had time to deflect it before it lunged at him. A sharp pain exploded in his side as the creature's claw grazed him, and he stumbled, nearly dropping the compass. Maya was at his side instantly, pulling him up. "You're hurt." "I'm fine," Julian gasped, though the sting burned fiercely. "We don't have time." Collins activated a control, and a protective barrier hummed to life around the lab, slowing the advance of the intruders but not stopping them. The battle raged on. Flashes of light, shouts, and the unearthly growls of the shadow beings filled the room. Then, amid the chaos, the portal began to pulse with a terrifying intensity. The glowing edges cracked, threatening to shatter like glass. "We're losing control," one scientist yelled. Julian's heart pounded harder than ever. With every ounce of strength, he pushed the compass to its limits. The needle aligned perfectly with the gate's core, and the device emitted a high-pitched resonance that echoed throughout the lab. A blinding light enveloped the threshold. The creatures shrieked, retreating as the portal began to collapse inward, the shimmering arch folding into itself. With a final surge, the gate snapped shut, a thunderous silence falling over the room. Panting and exhausted, Julian sank to the floor. The lab was battered, equipment damaged, but the immediate threat was gone. Collins approached, placing a firm hand on Julian's shoulder. "You did it. You saved us all." Julian looked toward the darkened lunar surface beyond the windows. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. "Where is my father?" Julian asked, voice barely above a whisper. Collins met his gaze. "He's out there, caught between worlds. And now, more than ever, we need you to find him." Julian nodded, determination rekindled. The next step of his journey was clear, crossing into the unknown to rescue his father and prevent the looming disaster. The threshold may have been sealed for now, but its secrets were just beginning to unfold. The sealed threshold hummed faintly, a reminder of the fragile barrier between worlds. Julian sat quietly, the compass resting heavily in his palm, its glow now a soft, steady pulse. The battle had ended, for now, but the journey ahead was far more daunting. Maya packed her equipment methodically, eyes flickering with a mix of excitement and concern. "We've stabilized the gate, but only temporarily. The inversion threat hasn't disappeared. We're buying time, not winning the war." Julian's gaze drifted to the window, overlooking the lunar surface. The moon's silent, barren expanse stretched endlessly, but beyond it lay something no one had fully understood, a dimension twisted and unknown. "We have to find my father," Julian said quietly. "He's trapped out there, somewhere beyond the threshold." Collins approached, his face grim but resolute. "Crossing over isn't like stepping through a door. The other side is unpredictable, dangerous. Time might flow differently, and the landscape can change at a moment's notice." Maya nodded in agreement. "We'll need specialized gear, sensors calibrated for that dimension's unique energies, and a way to communicate, if possible." Julian clenched his fist. "Whatever it takes. I'm ready." The team quickly assembled the equipment. A modified EVA suit equipped with new sensors and a compact communication device was prepared. The compass, their key, was integrated into the suit's control panel, its energy guiding their way. As Julian donned the suit, a strange calm settled over him. The weight of uncertainty pressed down, but his resolve was unwavering. Stepping toward the newly stabilized gate, the team activated the sequence to reopen the threshold. The shimmering arch flickered to life, its glow a gateway to the unknown. Julian glanced back at the team. "If I don't make it back, promise me you'll keep fighting to protect both worlds." Maya's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "We will. And we'll find you." Taking a deep breath, Julian stepped into the light. A sudden rush of cold, then silence, so profound it felt as if the world itself had stopped. When he opened his eyes, the landscape was alien. The sky above shifted with colors unfamiliar, swirling in slow currents. Strange plants, bioluminescent and ethereal, cast a faint glow across jagged rocks. Julian took cautious steps forward, the compass needle spinning wildly but pulling him toward an unseen destination. Suddenly, the ground trembled. A distant roar echoed through the strange terrain. He was not alone. The journey to find his father, to understand the mysteries of the threshold and the inversion, had truly begun, in a world unlike any other. Julian stood still, his breath clouding inside the helmet despite the warm glow of the strange world. The sky above shimmered with hues of violet and gold, shifting like oil on water. Around him, towering crystalline structures rose from the ground, pulsating gently with a rhythm that felt alive. His suit's sensors were overwhelmed. Temperature, gravity, atmospheric pressure, none of it matched earthly logic. This world obeyed different rules. Even time itself seemed to move at a fractured pace, as if moments slipped between the seconds. The compass on his wrist buzzed softly and began to stabilize, the needle drawing a steady path toward a narrow ridge in the distance. Julian followed, stepping carefully over strange, vine-like growths that recoiled at his presence. Every few steps, echoes whispered around him, voices that weren't quite words. Some sounded like his name. Others were memories, fragments of laughter or warning cries. It was as if the dimension itself had memory, and was trying to communicate. Suddenly, the landscape shifted. A shimmer rippled across the ridge ahead, revealing a camp, old, decaying, and eerily familiar. Julian approached cautiously. Tattered flags bearing NASA insignias flapped in the breeze. Rusted equipment lay strewn across the clearing, including an abandoned lunar rover. It was real, evidence that someone had been here before. His heart pounded. Then he saw it, a recording unit, half buried in the dirt. With shaking hands, he activated it. The screen flickered. A ghostly image emerged, Commander Elias Reed, his father. A younger version than Julian remembered, wearing the same suit design. "If anyone finds this," the recording said, "you are standing on the edge of two realities. We misjudged the threshold. It isn't just a passage, it's a lens. It shows you what you most fear, or what you most want." Julian knelt beside the device, tears welling up. His father's voice, even decades old, struck him deeply. "We tried to map this world," the message continued, "but it resists logic. Don't trust everything you see. Some things will pretend to be us, to draw you in. But I'm still alive. I think I found a way to hide. Follow the light that doesn't cast a shadow." The message ended with static. Julian rose slowly, glancing around. Already, the world felt different. The camp behind him began to flicker, as if dissolving into mist. He was being watched. From the corner of his vision, a silhouette shifted, too human in shape, too still. He turned to face it. But it vanished. The threshold hadn't just let him in, it had awakened something. And now, it was aware of him too. Julian pressed forward, each step a negotiation between awe and dread. The otherworldly terrain stretched endlessly, its colors shifting subtly with his emotions. It was as if the land breathed with him, responded to him. This place was alive, not biologically, but consciously. A dream that remembered its dreamer. The compass still pointed steadily forward, though its glow had dimmed. Shadows began to creep across the alien sky, not cast by any sun but seeming to emerge from the air itself. The silence was thick, broken only by the occasional whisper of wind, or what passed for wind here. Then, the terrain abruptly changed. A narrow path opened between two massive stone-like structures, etched with symbols eerily reminiscent of both ancient Earth languages and high-frequency waveforms. The walls pulsed faintly as he passed them, and for a moment, Julian swore he heard his mother's voice call his name, a memory plucked from childhood and made painfully real. He stopped. Was this what his father meant in the recording, a place that conjured illusion from emotion? Julian activated a small device clipped to his chest, an audio anchor Maya had helped design. It played a steady sequence of Earth-based frequencies meant to counteract potential psychic interference. The hallucinations faded slightly, but not entirely. Beyond the stone corridor, the landscape opened into a basin of strange trees, not wood and leaf, but crystalline and fluid, rising and flowing like slow fountains frozen mid-motion. Between them moved shapes. Human shapes. Julian ducked behind one of the crystalline trunks, observing cautiously. The figures moved as if on a loop, walking the same paths, repeating gestures. One knelt to tie a boot, another checked a non-existent watch, another looked up at the shimmering sky. Then one turned toward him. Julian's breath caught. It was himself. Or rather, a near-perfect replica. The double began walking toward him, and Julian backed away instinctively. But as it approached, its movements glitched, flickering like bad video. The illusion broke for a second, revealing dark, hollow eyes and a jaw slightly too wide for a human skull. This wasn't a clone. It was a mimic. He ran. Branches of light slashed past him. The mimic gave chase, its footsteps not matching its movements, as if sound and presence were slightly misaligned. Julian burst out of the grove into a wide, open canyon. The compass vibrated violently now, pointing toward a cave mouth at the base of a dark cliff. With no time to second-guess, Julian darted inside. The darkness enveloped him instantly. The mimic stopped at the edge, hissing, unable to enter. Inside the cave, the compass calmed. Then, a voice. Weak but familiar. Julian. He turned. A figure leaned against the cave wall, frail, older, but unmistakably human. It was his father. Julian's heart stopped. The man in the cave looked worn by time, hair streaked with gray, cheeks hollowed, eyes surrounded by dark circles. But beneath the years and the exhaustion, the resemblance was undeniable. "Dad," Julian whispered. Elias Reed didn't answer immediately. His gaze, half in shock and half in disbelief, swept over Julian like someone studying a long-forgotten photograph. Then he chuckled, low and dry, as if it hurt to laugh. "You look like I remember," Elias said. "Maybe better." Julian took a cautious step forward. I thought you were gone." Elias interrupted softly. "I was. In every way that matters, I was. But something held me here." The elder Reed struggled to stand. Julian rushed to support him, stunned by how light and fragile his father felt beneath the pressure suit, like a man carved out of memory, not flesh. "This world doesn't age you the way Earth does," Elias muttered. "Not at first. But over time, it drains, not your body, but your will." I stayed near the cave. It's the only place they can't touch. Julian looked toward the mouth of the cave, the mimic still lingering outside, pacing like a shadow disconnected from its source. "They?" Julian asked. Elias nodded grimly. "Echo forms. This place copies thoughts, feelings. It learns from fear. And once it has enough, it starts building approximations. Some are nearly perfect. Some are just noise. All of them dangerous." Julian sat beside his father, mind racing. "Why did NASA never come back for you?" "They tried," Elias said, his voice hollow. "Missions were planned, but the threshold closes unevenly. Sometimes years pass here and only days on Earth. Sometimes the opposite. I left messages, but maybe they got lost in the noise. Maybe someone didn't want them to be heard." Julian pulled out the compass device, its needle still glowing faintly. "This brought me here. It reacted to the threshold." Elias stared at it like he was seeing a relic from another lifetime. "I made that. Or started to. It's a key. But the exit? That's harder." Julian frowned. "You said the cave was safe. Why?" Elias leaned back against the stone. "The cave sits at a harmonic node, a null frequency where the echo forms can't hold shape. But outside, they mimic emotions. Even memories. They become people you've lost. People you trust." Julian thought of the grove. Of the mimic that had worn his face. "And now?" he asked. His father's eyes met his. "Now we destroy the gate. before the echoforms find a way through. Julian swallowed hard. Can we even do that? Elias managed a smile. With you here, maybe we can. The shadows outside stirred restlessly, as if sensing a shift in momentum. The echoforms were listening. Watching. Time was running out. Julian stood at the mouth of the cave, watching the dim, shifting silhouettes beyond the ridge. The landscape of this alternate world pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, as if reality itself breathed differently here. The echoforms, creatures of memory and distortion, stalked the horizon, drawn by the convergence of father and son. Elias knelt beside the old terminal embedded in the cave wall, a remnant of a time when this chamber had been a forward operating post for Lunar Command. Dust coated the buttons and cracked screen, but Elias's fingers moved over the panel with familiarity. I left behind a failsafe, he said. If the threshold ever became unstable. It's not elegant, but it should do the job. Julian glanced down at the device in his hand, the compass key. What happens if we destroy the threshold? Then this world collapses back in on itself, Elias replied. And everything in it, the echoforms, the fractured echoes, will cease. But so will the link. We won't be able to return. Julian froze. Wait, we won't make it back. There's a chance we can. A narrow one, Elias admitted. But the window closes fast. Once the overload starts, the feedback will tear through every dimensional seam holding this world together. Julian's grip tightened. So we either risk being trapped, or let those things reach Earth. A low rumble echoed through the cave, as if the threshold itself had overheard their plan. Elias stood, wiping sweat from his brow. You still want to go through with it? Julian nodded. If we don't, more people could die. You already paid the price once. I won't let your sacrifice be for nothing. Together, they emerged from the cave, bracing against a wave of heat and distortion rippling across the landscape. The threshold, a shimmering arc of light, hovered in the distance, thrumming with unstable energy. As they approached, the echoforms grew bolder, their outlines coalescing into familiar forms, a childhood friend, a lost colleague, even Julian's mother. They're not real, Elias whispered. Keep walking. Julian focused on the compass. Its needle spun erratically, caught in the chaos of collapsing physics. He inserted it into the control slot at the base of the threshold. The device reacted instantly, sparks flew, and the gate flickered, emitting a shrill hum. Elias slammed the override key into the adjacent terminal, punching in a sequence. The threshold shuddered violently. Suddenly, one of the echoforms lunged forward, a near-perfect replica of Julian himself, twisted with rage. It collided with Julian, knocking him to the ground. He fought back, heart pounding, until Elias pulled the mimic away and crushed it with a jolt of the emergency disruptor. Now! Elias shouted. Julian crawled to the console and hit the final command. The threshold exploded in a surge of light and collapsing geometry. The world around them trembled, folding in on itself like a dying star. Julian and Elias ran toward the collapsing horizon, chasing a vanishing point of light. And then, darkness. Silence. Julian woke up gasping. On a grassy hill. A different Earth. Empty skies. But beside him, still breathing, was his father. The threshold was gone. But the story was not over. The wind was different here. Softer. Hollow. Julian sat on the grassy hill, eyes tracing the empty horizon. No buildings. No contrails in the sky. No distant hum of life. Just an eerie stillness, as though this earth had exhaled a final breath and never inhaled again. Elias stirred beside him, blinking against the sunlight that felt too white, too clean. He sat up slowly, rubbing his temple. We made it. Julian didn't respond right away. He was watching a tree not far from them. Its leaves shimmered subtly, but unnaturally, as if refracting light through a prism that wasn't supposed to exist. This isn't home, Julian finally said. Elias followed his gaze. No, but we're close. The threshold didn't return us to our Earth, but maybe to one still connected in some way. They began walking. Hours passed in silence. They found no cities, no signs of civilization. Only the remnants of structures, skeletal outlines of homes, metal twisted by time and warped physics. Nature had reclaimed the world in strange, beautiful, and haunting ways. Eventually, they stumbled upon an old satellite dish, partially buried in soil. Elias's eyes lit up. Lunar Command used to piggyback emergency broadcasts off satellites. If there's even a shred of residual energy left, we might be able to send a message. Julian watched as his father scrambled to connect wires and patch together a rudimentary transmitter. Despite the warped environment, Elias still moved with purpose, driven by a deep, unspoken hope. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Julian climbed a nearby ridge. There, on the edge of the world, he saw something impossible, a faint shimmer, like heat haze on the ocean. But when he squinted, he could make out familiar shapes, outlines of skyscrapers, maybe a skyline. Could it be a mirage? Or another threshold fragment, bleeding through? He rushed down to tell his father. By the time he reached the makeshift radio post, Elias had powered up the transmitter. The device buzzed and crackled as a faint signal came through, a broken voice, robotic and looping. If you can hear this. Lunar Command Emergency Protocol active. Frequency marker 909. Repeat. Julian's heart pounded. That's our Earth. That has to be. Elias nodded. Or a version of it. Either way, someone's listening. They tuned into the coordinates the signal repeated. Julian turned to his father. We follow it. And with that, the two of them, father and son, scientist and seeker, packed their things and began the long trek toward the shimmer on the horizon. The new Earth was quiet, yes, but not empty. Something, or someone, was still trying to reach them. And this time, Julian wouldn't stop until he found the way home. The road to the shimmer was not a road at all, just uneven ground stitched together by roots and gravel, with no sign of infrastructure or civilization. Yet the beacon signal from the old satellite dish kept pulsing steadily, guiding Julian and Elias like a distant lighthouse across a sea of alien silence. Julian held the compass device close to his chest. Though it had stopped spinning wildly like before, the needle still leaned slightly, as if tugged toward something unseen. Each step forward intensified the pull, less magnetic, more instinctual. Like the Earth itself, or this version of it, was aware of their presence and urging them somewhere. They passed through what looked like the skeleton of a small town, faded road signs, overgrown parking lots, empty playgrounds rusted by time. Elias stopped near an abandoned convenience store and scanned the building. We should rest here for a few hours, he said, coughing into his sleeve. Inside, time had frozen. Shelves still held long-expired goods, and faded magazines clung to racks, their covers warped by moisture. Julian sat near a broken freezer while Elias tinkered with the portable receiver again. We're getting closer, Elias muttered. The signal's gaining clarity, less static, more structure. Julian leaned forward. Could it be someone trying to re-establish contact with any surviving versions of us? Elias hesitated before answering. Possibly. Or, it could be something trying to mimic us. Julian's breath caught. You think the entities, those interdimensional beings, could be behind it? I don't know, Elias admitted. But whatever it is, it's on the same frequency we used for emergency communication during Apollo 18. Either someone survived, or something learned how to speak our language. That night, Julian dreamed again. He stood on the surface of the moon, alone. The sky above was a swirl of stars, yet the Earth was absent. Instead, a vast, circular structure hovered silently above him, pulsing with a dull, amber glow. A figure stood at the base of the arch, facing away from him. Dad! Julian called. The figure turned slowly. It wasn't Elias. Julian jolted awake, drenched in sweat. Elias was already awake, standing outside, staring into the fog. We need to move. The journey continued at dawn. The air grew heavier the closer they got to the shimmer, thick with static and low-frequency vibrations that tingled in their bones. Trees began to warp in shape, curving in unnatural arcs, as if drawn toward the horizon. Then, they saw it. A tower. Not large or intimidating, but deliberate in its presence. It jutted from the ground like a beacon, smooth, metallic, humming with a soft glow. Panels on its sides shimmered with shifting symbols that Julian didn't recognize but somehow understood. "This wasn't made by us," Elias said, awestruck. "But someone, or something, wanted us to find it." Julian stepped closer. His compass vibrated in his hand. The shimmer in the distance seemed to pulse in sync with the tower, like a portal waiting to be opened. Julian turned to his father. "Are we ready for what's next?" Elias, after a long silence, nodded. "No. But we go anyway." The closer they came to the tower, the more Julian felt reality slipping, not in a violent way, but like the sensation of stepping through a dream you couldn't wake from. The sky above shimmered, fractured in some places like broken glass, and sound moved oddly, as if filtered through layers of time. Elias placed a hand on the tower's surface. The panels responded instantly, lighting up beneath his touch. Strange symbols rearranged themselves into a pattern, circular, precise, pulsing like a heartbeat. "This is a conduit," he whispered. "Not just a transmitter." "A transmitter to where?" Julian asked, watching as the air around the tower began to vibrate with increasing energy. Elias stared into the distance. "Not where. When. Or maybe, both." Julian opened the journal again, flipping to a page where his father had drawn similar symbols. They weren't just notes, they were instructions. Coordinates. Sequences. One phrase stood out, underlined twice. "Only the fractured can pass through whole." "What does that mean?" Julian murmured. Elias replied without looking up. "That the gate doesn't open for someone perfect. It opens for someone broken enough to slip through the cracks." Julian touched the compass. Its vibration intensified, responding to the tower's hum. The fog parted slowly as if the world itself recognized their intent. The shimmer, no longer a distant phenomenon, now formed a veil just behind the tower, arching like a massive curtain of liquid light. Then came the voice. A low, vibrating tone emerged from the tower. Not speech, but frequency. It was communicating, testing them. Elias adjusted the device they had built from salvaged parts, tuning it until the frequency matched. A blast of invisible energy hit the ground around them, kicking up dust and small rocks, but they stood firm. The shimmer opened. Not wide, but enough to see what lay beyond. Julian's breath caught. It was Earth, but not their Earth. Towering cities stretched toward a darkened sky. Structures bent at impossible angles, as if built without regard for gravity or dimension. There were lights, but no sun. Movement, but no life as they knew it. And then, something moved behind the veil. A shadow. A figure. It was human, almost, but wrong. Its proportions were off. Its presence, dissonant. Julian stepped back, instinctively. "That's not from our side," Elias said, eyes narrowing. "It's something that came through, and stayed." Before Julian could speak, the shadow placed a hand against the veil. The shimmer rippled, responding to the touch. "It's trying to come through," Julian whispered. "No," Elias said grimly. "It's waiting for us to invite it." The compass in Julian's hand pulsed once, then stopped. The decision was his now. If they walked through, there was no guarantee of return. No promise of answers. Just a fractured world that might contain the key, or their end. Julian turned to Elias. "What if this is the only way to reach him?" Elias looked at his son. "Then we go. Together." They stepped forward as the veil opened wider, welcoming the broken, and hiding what lay on the other side. As Julian and Elias stepped through the veil, it was as though the world unraveled and rewove itself in an instant. There was no falling, no sense of motion. One blink, and everything changed. They emerged into silence. The sky above was heavy and dark, filled with constellations Julian had never seen, some resembling ancient glyphs, others shifting slowly like living symbols. The air felt dense, humming with energy, and carried a faint metallic tang. All around them were structures of impossible design, towers with spines that twisted skyward like frozen lightning, bridges suspended between floating stones, and doorways that led to nowhere and everywhere at once. Julian instinctively reached for the compass. It began to turn, not spinning wildly as before, but gently, as if guiding them toward something, or someone. Elias pointed ahead. There. That ridge. They walked in silence, each step echoing as if the ground itself remembered every footfall. The path was carved with symbols matching those from the journal. This place, it had a memory. It had seen the same people, the same fears, long ago. As they reached the ridge, the landscape opened into a vast plain, a field of fractured mirrors embedded into the ground. Each mirrored shard reflected not just their images, but other versions of themselves, some older, some younger, some distorted beyond recognition. Julian knelt beside one. In its surface, he saw himself wearing a NASA flight suit. Behind him stood a woman, his mother? She was alive in that world. These are echoes, Elias said quietly, kneeling beside him. Glimpses of paths not taken. Realities that tried to be, but never fully formed. A faint sound drifted through the air, a soft rhythmic tapping. At first, Julian thought it was the wind. Then he heard it clearly, Morse code. He scrambled to find the source, holding the compass out like a receiver. The signal grew stronger, pulsing in time. It was a message. Julian. The name repeated again and again. His father was alive. The signal led them toward a stone structure shaped like an inverted pyramid. It hovered slightly above the ground, supported by nothing. As they approached, an opening yawned wide, revealing a dim hallway carved with swirling lines that shifted when not looked at directly. Inside, the air was colder. The tapping continued. They followed the sound to a circular chamber, at the center of which stood a tall, obelisk-like machine surrounded by floating orbs of light. In one of the orbs, Julian saw the face of his father, worn, older, but unmistakably Thomas Reed. "Dad," he breathed, reaching toward the light. The orb responded, flickering violently. A distorted voice emerged, scrambled by layers of static and space. "Julian." The gate, weakening. Inversion. Soon. Elias's face darkened. The inversion. It's happening here, too. The chamber shook, a low rumble building from beneath. One of the walls cracked open, revealing another corridor, and from its depths, a figure emerged. It was tall, skeletal, cloaked in shadows. Its face was smooth, featureless, yet it exuded familiarity. Julian stumbled back. "What is that?" Elias stood protectively in front of him. "A warden. These entities guard the threshold. But it shouldn't be awake yet." The figure stepped forward, and for the first time, it spoke, not with words, but by invading their minds. "You seek what cannot be undone." Julian gripped the compass tighter. "I'm not undoing anything. I'm finding him. I'm bringing him back." The entity tilted its head. "To find him, you must become like him." Then it raised its arm, and the mirrors around the chamber began to shatter. The chamber trembled violently as the mirrors shattered one by one, releasing fractured pulses of light into the air. Julian shielded his face, heart pounding. The warden stood still in the center, arms outstretched, as if pulling the very fabric of the realm apart. "We can't stay," Elias shouted. "The inversion is accelerating." But Julian didn't move. His eyes were locked on the floating orb where his father's face flickered like a candle in a storm. The message was breaking apart, but one word repeated again and again. "Believe." Julian turned to Elias. What did he mean? "You must become like him"? Elias's face was pale. He meant crossing over. Sacrifice. Like your father did. To restore balance, Someone must anchor the threshold from inside, or the inversion will collapse every version of reality into one. Chaos. Julian's grip on the compass tightened. The device was glowing now, vibrating, pulling toward the obelisk at the chamber's center. I have to do it, he whispered. He left away. That's why he gave me this. Julian. Elias stepped forward, voice shaking. If you do this, you might never return. Julian smiled faintly. Neither did he. But he stayed, for us. Without waiting for a response, Julian stepped into the heart of the obelisk. The compass lit up completely, releasing a pulse that threw Elias backward. The room stilled. The warden froze. Inside the light, Julian stood suspended. All around him were layers of himself: child, teenager, astronaut, scientist, son. A voice, soft and warm, echoed in his mind. His father's. You were never lost. You were always the key. Julian placed the compass into the central slot within the obelisk. A surge of energy rushed outward. The mirrors realigned. The broken sky above the world healed, stars returning to their places. The warden let out a soundless cry and dissolved into mist. Elias stood alone, the light fading. Julian was gone. But the realm no longer trembled. Back on Earth, months later, at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, Dr. Wilson stared at a terminal screen. A signal had arrived, a burst of data encoded in the same frequency as the long-lost Apollo 18 transmission. Inside the data stream was a single phrase. Threshold anchored. We're still here. She leaned back, eyes wide, whispering to herself. He did it. In another place, a world similar yet subtly different, Julian stood on a quiet hill. A familiar skyline shimmered in the distance. Birds flew overhead. Peace. Behind him, a voice spoke. Warm. Gentle. You found the way. Julian turned. It was his father, smiling.